Do you yearn for travel that involves outdoor adventure and learning? I do. I also have a passion for all things farming and agriculture. I've traveled to exotic jungles to learn about growing chocolate. I even once owned my own organic vegetable and sunflower farm. And now I'm planning my journey back to agriculture. Agritourism, defined as travel that involves some type of agricultural experience. Agritourism is all about entertaining. But the marketing strategist in me knows that at its core, agritourism is really about educating, and education affects change. My future farm needs to deliver a profound experience to all of its visitors. It needs to educate people about food, health, and climate. Join me to learn from experienced agritourism farmers and entrepreneurs and help me build my future farm strategy. And who knows, maybe one day soon you'll find yourself in a tropical jungle cutting open cacao pods with a machete, or savoring an outdoor plant-to-plate community dinner with 100 guests at a farm in Illinois. So let's tap into the agritourist in you. This is your agritourist host, Jen Ross. Rachael Callahan is currently California's statewide agritourism coordinator focused on the Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education Program. Originally from Delaware, Rachael stumbled into sustainable agriculture from her graduate studies and has focused on local and regional food systems. She spent time in Belize working on an agroforestry farm, and then she spent time in Nantucket working for a nonprofit focused on bolstering the local food economy. Eventually, she moved to Washington, D.C. to work on an urban farm. Her experiences working in very different and unique communities, aligned with her education, allowed her to expand her scope of work and take on a very challenging role as statewide agritourism coordinator for the entire state of California. In her role, Rachael provides training to farmers and ranchers interested in diversifying their income via agritourism. She examines trends, impacts, challenges, and barriers, and identifies solutions. She also focuses on capacity and network building by connecting farmers throughout the state. Rachael is constantly inspired by the resilience, determination, creativity, and innovation of California's agricultural producers, and is very grateful for being in a role that supports them. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Rachael Callahan. So, Rachael, tell me about you. I kind of want to know your backstory. You have some interesting background that led you into your current position, and we'll get into your current position because I definitely want to explore California. So tell me about you.
Yeah, well, I have been lucky enough to have some really interesting and diverse experiences, but I grew up in Delaware. I'm from the Mid-Atlantic area. And I think that really provided the foundation that kind of led me on my path. And it's interesting, in retrospect, we can look back and see how the dots connect, but
Yeah.
I don't know that I was very intentional about it at the beginning. But
Where in Delaware did you grow up?
I'm from Newark, Delaware.
Okay.
Home of the University of Delaware. So I studied international affairs in undergraduate, and then I received my master's in global environmental policy. So I think I was always thinking bigger, global, really thinking about, how we all connect, and perhaps, being from the smallest state in the United States, perhaps I was thinking about what was beyond those beyond those walls there. And I kind of stumbled in a way into sustainable agricultural work. I was really looking, particularly in my master's work with global environmental policy, really looking at the root causes of environmental degradation, and found that export agriculture for the global economy was really a leading cause of environmental degradation in many developing countries, and kind of got on the path of looking at local and regional food systems and the potential there for sustainability, economically, socially, and environmental sustainability through local and regional food systems, and how that could lead to food security, food sovereignty, all of these things, community connection. And that's how I stumbled into sustainable agriculture. And so from a very global perspective, I've worked on projects that are really focused, and with organizations that are really focused on supporting local and regional food systems.
So give me an example. I know you went to Belize. I know that was one of them. You may have some others. So give me an example of what some of the things you've done at that point in time.
Sure. Well, I my first job was in Belize, and it was just a dream. And I was working on a demonstration agroforestry farm there that was really looking at and modeling sort of indigenous uh, land stewardship and farming techniques, sort of as opposed to sort of monocropping bananas and coffee and cacao, which um, there was a lot of in that region of Belize. And um, it was a place where academics and researchers would come and study ecosystem services or migratory birds and all these values that a vibrant, diverse farm can provide. But we also had backpackers coming through and staying and learning how to cook on a wooden stove and things like that. So there was an intersection with agritourism there as well. And after that, I went to Nantucket, an island off of the coast of Massachusetts, off of Cape Cod, and completely different environment, right? So instead of a very rural sort of in the jungle setting in Belize, this was an island community off of Cape Cod in Massachusetts, that is known for having wealthy inhabitants have their summer homes there. But when you're on an island, it's food security becomes kind of front and center, because when there was a storm and the boats couldn't come to deliver food to the grocery store, it got scary, right? Like you noticed when there wasn't enough on island food production. So I worked for a nonprofit there that was really working to bolster the local food economy there and create a demand for the local farm products that were grown on the island, and also kind of create opportunities for new and beginning farmers. Land was at a premium there. Lots of land is either residential, extremely high priced, or in conservation, which was great, but not really available for agricultural production. So some of the work of that nonprofit was to form relationships with the Conservation Society to, introduce grazing and things like that on conservation land, so that there still could be some production happening. So that was quite interesting. And then from there, I moved to Washington, D.C., where I worked on an urban farm and education center, and we were very focused on feeding and working with the community within blocks of where we were, and we were modeling best practices and sort of trying to pioneer a urban ag production farm, and we were very much a part of the Washington D.C. community, but we were very focused on interacting with our super duper local community.
So bring me back to Belize for a second. Like that was, I guess, one of your first real jobs, I guess you could say. What were some of the takeaways from that? What were you thinking at the time as you experienced being down there in Belize and learning what you were learning? Like what were some of the concerns? What was in your head at the time when you were down there, and then when you were making your next step?
Well, for me personally, it was transformative, because I lived on this agroforestry farm, which was completely off the grid. And it really put in perspective to me. I mean, we would bring, rice and other staple products in from town, but essentially everything we were eating, we had to harvest that day, had to process it, our fuel for our wood burning fire stove, we had to harvest. And when it was really wet and we had not been prepared, and couldn't get a fire going, we had to not have hot or cooked food. And it took so much time. So much of the day was devoted towards harvesting and prepping for our meal. But we were very self-contained. And so for me, that was just really transformative on a personal level. But in terms of sort of bigger picture and how it sort of informed my next steps as a career, I think that it was so front and center for me, the value that spaces like that could bring, particularly in terms of environmental and ecosystem services. If our land is carefully managed, honoring the native plants and indigenous foodways, and sort of not overly managed, the ecosystem services that it can provide in terms of habitat, soil conservation, erosion control, all of those things. So were so important. So that was a key takeaway for me. And then also the space just as a community space and an educational space. Even if what was happening on that farm couldn't be directly applicable to a farmer from Germany, for example, because the climate's different, the native plants are so different. The concepts of kind of working within what that piece of land has to offer, honoring that and stewarding it, I think are transferable. And that was really exciting for me. And it got me thinking, well, what does that look like for Delaware, where I grew up, or for any place else where I've moved or lived since then.
Excellent. Is that farm still in existence?
It is Maya Mountain Research Farm.
Excellent. Excellent.
I haven't visited since, but I understand that it's thriving.
Excellent. I have to look into it some more. Okay, so then you were in Cape Cod, right? Was it Cape Cod?
Yeah, in Nantucket.
Okay. So and then you jumped to the next step, that was Washington. So again, what were those transitions about, and what were, where were you? What was the evolution of that? What were you thinking? Because I guess I want to get you to California, but I want to understand that transition, because it's just interesting how this evolves in someone, so just go ahead, give me a little perspective on that.
Well, I think part of it is by chance. So I ended up in Belize in part because I graduated my master's degree during a recession in 2008 and 2009. And there weren't very many opportunities. I wanted to work abroad anyway. I was not getting paid a lot, but it was an amazing experience. And then after leaving that, I had a friend who was farming in Nantucket and said, "Hey, come up." And I spent a couple months there and worked in a restaurant and nannied and like didn't have
okay, whatever works.
By being on the ground there, I connected with the nonprofit and got my job there. And then from there, I essentially realized I was younger at that time and living on a secluded island and didn't have access to go to a concert at night and things like that.
Yep.
So I was ready to move back to an urban environment, and I have family in Washington, D.C., and it's always been near and dear to my heart. So I was really excited by the opportunity to work for an urban farm. And then from there, as I said, we were pretty hyper locally focused. And at that point, I had several different experiences in different types of communities, rural, urban, remote, etc., and was ready to really apply that knowledge, bring in my education, thinking about sort of policy on a larger scale, and scale up my impact, my professional impact. And California is a great place to do that. I have a statewide position, so that felt like an expansion for me, and it's, extremely important for agricultural production, not only for our country, but for around the world.
So tell me your title and talk to me about what does this role, what does it do? Because you picked one of the biggest states with and a diverse state at that from an agricultural perspective. So go ahead, let me hear all about this because it's definitely intriguing.
Yeah, my position is the statewide agritourism coordinator with the University of California in the Division of Agriculture and Natural Resources, and I work with the Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education Program. Even I have trouble with it. So this position, so it's interesting. I would say I saw this position. I was looking for jobs in California. And the University of California obviously has a very amazing reputation with working in the agricultural field and sustainable agriculture as well. And I saw this position, statewide agritourism coordinator, and I had obviously heard the term agritourism before, but it was sort of peripheral. I felt like when we had backpackers come in Belize and stay with us, that's agritourism. And when I was working with farms in Nantucket and they held weddings and special events on their farm, that's agritourism. But it wasn't so central to what I was thinking about as my field or an expertise. But so I saw this position, that's great, did some research and realized, oh, I've been doing agritourism my whole life and my whole career because it encompasses your U-Pick farms and your pumpkin patches and educational workshops, farm field trips. I can't tell you how many students from Washington, D.C. came through our urban farm. I mean, like 4,000 a year or something like that. So I have loved agritourism, seen its value, both for the farmer as well as for the visitor, and thought, okay, this is it. This is a really great opportunity for me. So my position really is kind of working. I like to think about it as working in three different areas. One is providing training directly to farmers and ranchers in California that are interested in diversifying their income through agritourism. So in the university, we have developed really excellent resources, guides, fact sheets, budget calculators, etc., to help farmers make informed decisions about if agritourism is the right avenue for them, and if so, what are the best practices to pursue that. So that's number one, education and training for California farmers and ranchers. Number two is to really gather data and information about agritourism in California. What are the trends? What are the impacts? What are the challenges and barriers? And then potentially, what are the solutions to addressing those challenges and barriers? So there's a research and kind of data component to it. And then the third is really about capacity building and network building. So I do a lot to try and connect farmers around the state so that they can connect with each other. There are many nonprofits and producer organizations that support farmers on the local and regional level, connecting them so that they can share their experiences and ideas and best practices. So those are sort of the three avenues in which I work.
Excellent. It's a huge impact, I'm sure, to the community that you serve. So let's talk about California. Talk to me about, I mean, I know it's it's a lot. So talk to me about agriculture in California. And agritourism. Let's get a perspective for people. A lot of people think vineyards right away. Obviously a lot of produce in New York comes from California. So just give me a perspective of California agriculture.
Yes, well, it's big and it's diverse. So we have anywhere from quite large commercial agricultural farms. You find them a lot in the Central Valley of California that are producing vegetable crops primarily for a lot of the United States and for export as well. And then we have many small family farms as well. So there's really and everything in between, every scale in between. Many products. I mean, I didn't look at the crop report before getting on this call, but such a diversity of specialty crops like vegetables and fruit, as well as grains. We have a huge rice industry, tree nuts such as almonds and walnuts, a lot of citrus. So it's really quite diverse, and each region is diverse as well. I should also say our dairy industry, and we have a lot of ranchers with cattle. When it comes to agritourism, I interface primarily with our small scale farmers. I find that the small scale farmers are the farmers that are really engaging with agritourism here in California. And I think that's true elsewhere, or at least in many regions in the United States and certainly abroad. So those are the farmers and ranchers that I am typically working with. But within that total diversity of agricultural products.
So tell me about agritourism in California. What, I guess, give me some examples. What are people doing? Are they getting into agritourism because of the need from an income perspective, do you find? Or is it about education? Like, what do you think the driving force is, at least in the current environment?
One thing about agritourism in California is that it is very vibrant on the ground and from the grassroots. So our farmers and ranchers have excellent agritourism operations, are so creative. Many have been doing it for years. I mean, you mentioned the wine industry in Napa and Sonoma is decades old. We have a couple of producer organizations that support agritourism, more like the UPIC type of agritourism that have been around for 50 years, et cetera. So it's been vibrant and on the ground for a long time here. It's quite well established at the producer level, at the agritourism operator level. But the industry itself in California is quite underdeveloped. I think that we are playing catch up with the on the ground innovation of our farmers and ranchers. So it's a bit challenging to share sort of hard data and information about the agritourism industry. So one way in which the university has been trying to collect data is through producer surveys, and we've put 3 out over the past 15 years, and that's a really great foundation for information. And we also have the U.S. Census, which starting in 2002 included questions about agritourism. So from that, I can tell you it's imperfect data, but it's what we have. So from that, I can tell you that many of our agritourism operators, over 75%, are offering some sort of on-farm direct sales. So that is your UPIC or your farm stands. That is central to their agritourism business. After that, educational experiences and events, about half of our agritourism operators are engaging in those types of things. So that would be an on-farm workshop or a farm-to-table dinner or something like that. But we do I find it interesting that those on-farm direct sales are still a very key component of what agritourism looks like in California. When we look at why a farmer or rancher would get into agritourism, or when we ask our farmers and ranchers why they're doing it, the number one answer is income diversification. For sure, that is the main motivator. But then we also see a high percentage of our agritourism operators really talk about those social motivators, wanting to connect with their community, wanting to educate the public and feeling inspired by educating the public about farming, about rural life, etc. But for sure, the ultimate driver is increasing or diversifying their farm's income. And it's anecdotally, I think it depends a little bit about on what stage a farm business is in. So I interact with established farms, so they've been around for well over 10 years, and they are kind of just maybe starting to get into agritourism as a way to really help offset some of the losses that they might be seeing elsewhere. But then our new and beginning farmers who don't even have land yet, who don't even necessarily know what crop they want to produce, are already envisioning agritourism as part of their plan. And I think a lot of that is the idea of community and wanting to, create a space that that will bring in the public and will be, vibrant on the farm and not just at the farmer's market or at a farm to table restaurant where they're removed from that.
Okay. So obviously COVID had a huge impact on, encourage, and well, people wanted to go to farms, they wanted to get their produce. A lot of farms that I speak to obviously had an uptick in sales, sometimes a very significant uptick. Some businesses actually are flourishing because of that whole time period. But do you see any, now we're post-COVID, has that leveled off? Are people, we talk about education. I mean, intuitively, and even at my own farm at the time, I feel agritourism could have such an impact on making people understand more about, every aspect of food, if they're open to receiving it. So do we think those impacts are still there? Are they leveling off a bit, or what are farmers saying right now about people visiting and people engaging on a level where they actually are being educated?
I have heard a variety. Some of the farms and ranches that I've talked to have continued or see a continued momentum and interest that are, on COVID levels. And some have seen the drop off. Something that's interesting that might play a role in it is that some of our counties, so I will say in California, agritourism is regulated and permitted at the county level. So during COVID, some of our counties sort of relaxed some of their regulations to meet the need. Our county parks were closed, etc. And so farmland and farms really became a space for folks to just get outside, as you mentioned. Right. So our county sort of opened up and allowed that. And it was really successful for everybody. But now that COVID is over, the old rules are back on the table. So that's really restricted some of the offerings of our agritourism operators as well. So that plays a little bit of a role.
Do you guys have a lot of agritainment there?
Not as much as I've seen in other states. I think in part that might be because of the regulatory environment here in California. It's in most counties quite challenging and a high barrier to entry to be able to offer agritainment on your farmland. I think that's why you see that on-farm direct sales are so prevalent in our agritourism, because that is typically an easier permitting process and a lower cost permitting process. So I think that plays a role in why we don't see as much of it here in California.
Yeah, we have a lot of it here. But I think we're catching up on all those quote unquote rules. I know that a lot of counties and townships and all of that are now trying to figure out, what should be the rules? What are the tolerances and stuff like that? I was looking at farmland in a small farm in Connecticut, and I had all these questions about, okay, well, what are your rules around like all the things related to agritourism? And she's like, I don't know. She's so
Mhm.
she actually was on her agricultural committee, and they are actually tackling that like right now. So I was like, yeah, I'd be curious of the answers to that because even like she has this farm store, and I'm like, well, what are you allowed to sell there? Like, are you, is there a radius of, items can come from a certain radius, all those questions. And she was like, I don't know, so it's just interesting. So definitely, I think, and then I was talking to a farm out in, the Chicago area, and she had a lot. She does uh, farm dinners, like 100-person outdoor dinners at her farm, and the insurance. Um, she had years of working with lawyers and the insurance companies to figure out the proper insurance. Um, because they never dealt with anything like that. So it's just really interesting how this is evolving. But California seems to be a little bit ahead of the pack. So I think we need to take some, take some knowledge from you guys out there. But yeah, it's
Well,
interesting.
the grass is always greener. Sometimes I see what's happening in other states, and I think that we could learn from them as well. But I have a similar experience as what you were describing, is that our counties and our regulators and decision makers are really just catching up. And in many cases, you know, uh, if a farmer goes to the county with an idea, it could very well be the first time they've even thought about it or heard about it, and then are sort of trying to make decisions on the fly. And so some of our counties are kind of going through that process of creating ordinances that are specific around agritourism, but it's all very new here, and we're learning as we go. So of course there are always going to be those folks who ask for forgiveness, not permission. And sometimes that can be helpful. I, I can't say one way or the other.
I don't blame them. I've done that before. Sometimes you just got to do it and then figure it out from there. So, yeah. What about now climate? Obviously, California has, been impacted by droughts and fires even more significantly than some other states. So how has that impacted the industry?
Yeah, so again, it's a bit anecdotal because we really don't have a mechanism for really tracking. But I would say that it's just another layer of uncertainty and unpredictability that our farmers and ranchers face. And you know that. I mean, farming already is an inherently unpredictable profession or a lifestyle. But it's just, all the natural disasters have just really blown that out of the water. So how, it relates to the agritourism kind of varies. In some cases, it makes the agritourism operations very challenging because you have to on the fly um, change your operation or communicate to the public that you're not open because there's an atmospheric river coming through your property, or the air quality is so poor. So and if you don't already have communication channels very well established with the public, and kind of you're just on a listing with,
Right.
these are our open hours, folks could show up at your door. So that can be really challenging. And in some cases, agritourism is helpful. If there is crop failure due to a drought, for example, but you also have a farm stay or something like that, then you can be generating income from that outlet while other pieces of your agricultural business are at a loss. So it kind of depends. In some cases, the agritourism offsets the losses. In other cases, you see losses on both ends, and then that's pretty devastating.
Do you feel, I mean, I don't know if you have statistics on this, but just perception wise, Do you feel that farms are thriving right now, or do you see a decline in farms in
That's a
California?
yeah, that's a tough question. I mean, statistically, California is losing farms every year, particularly small farms. Interestingly enough, according to the USDA census, the number of agritourism farms is steadily increasing. So that's interesting. But yes, farms are on the decline in California. It is extremely difficult to be a farmer or a rancher at any scale, but particularly a small scale farmer in California. And that's really only made worse by the increasing natural disasters. So that is what it is, and it's not an optimistic outlook. At the same time, there are so many new beginning farmers, diverse farmers coming into the field that it's hard not to feel hopeful and not to feel excited about their enthusiasm and bringing in so many different approaches and ideas and indigenous knowledge and all these types of things that really, I think, are making our agricultural producers, our body of agricultural producers richer. And I really hope, and we have so many fantastic organizations that are there to support them, help with access to land, help with the regulatory barriers, but it's an uphill climb, and we have an enthusiastic new wave of farmers and ranchers and fisher folk, and if they have the opportunities and are not consistently hitting barriers, then we could be on the upswing here.
Right.
Time will tell.
So in your role, what do you see, like what are some of the things you want to achieve in the next few years in your role? Given also your personal, like what's at the core of this for you, and also the needs that are out there and the objectives of the university. I'm sure.
Yes,
We won't forget about that.
yeah, finding that balance of all the pieces that you just mentioned can sometimes be tricky, but I'm really focused for the next couple years. I'm really focused on building capacity for the industry on a statewide level, really trying to push the industry to catch up with the farmers and ranchers on the ground. So part of that is engaging other stakeholders, whether that's our Department of Agriculture, our tourism department. Really, how can we bring other folks into the table to create a supportive ecosystem for our farmers and ranchers who are out there trying to make it work, coming up with really great ideas, and just need the support. So I'm really focusing my energy on that. And that will, in my opinion, lead to sort of identifying common barriers, coming up with collective creative solutions, putting mechanisms in place whereby we are sort of systematically collecting data and information so we can track the impact. And so on and so forth. So I really feel like agritourism is a tactic to help keep small farmers on their land and keep them farming. We know that there are so many great benefits for educating the public. It's all there. We just need to support it. So that's my main goal.
Okay.
For the next couple of years.
And then do you serve or you work with any people in a similar role to yours in other states? Like I know Lisa Chase in Vermont. I know she's on some committee that's like more of a statewide committee. Do you collaborate on that level at all?
I do. So I interact with counterparts from other states somewhat frequently. There are a couple mechanisms by which we do that. There is a group called the National Extension Tourism Network, and that's for I think primarily for practitioners in extension, so typically working with universities who are working in this field. And we have conferences where we can share our work and share ideas and come up with ideas for collaboration. And there's also GAN, the Global Agricultural Network. And those two bodies have really been, I think, extremely helpful for me. I'm in California. I'm really the only one at the statewide level who thinks about agritourism all the time. And
Which is unbelievable.
I
That's
love my
like,
job, but it feels a little lonely sometimes. So the network of colleagues from around the country is really important to me, for my professional development and to learn what's going on elsewhere, around the country, and then bring that back to California. California really likes to be a leader, really likes to set the stage. So when I can go to folks in California and say, actually, Vermont and South Carolina, these other places are kind of ahead of us in these certain arenas. We need to play catch up. That's really powerful.
absolutely. I love what Will Cullen is doing at with the Ag and Art Tour.
Mhm.
I love that concept. I think, and I love how South Carolina and so many counties in South Carolina have embraced it. I think it could be a really powerful marketing opportunity for even other states to take on. So I'm a marketer by heart, so and by
Mhm.
career. So when I see things like that, I embrace them. Um, so in your experiences so far in California, have you seen anything that stands out to you as something really unique that someone is doing from an agritourism perspective, something fun, something that you haven't seen before, something you like to talk about as a case study?
Mm, I think that everything I see, I think is so
I
neat. I'm
know.
always so impressed. Farmers and ranchers are just so creative, so innovative. I don't know if I've seen anything that's like uber. Oh, there's this one farm. Macado's Mini Acres, and they have alpacas and they do painting classes with their alpacas. So they'll bring students in, and the students can like paint a portrait of the alpaca, but then also the alpacas will pick up the paintbrushes and like paint on a canvas. And that's just super
Are you
cool.
serious?
Yeah, it's so cool.
That is what was the name of that farm?
Macado's Mini Acres.
Oh my God, that is very creative. I'd like to see that in action.
Yeah, that's really cool. And anytime an animal's involved, I mean, it's just so sweet. But yeah, I think one thing I love about agritourism is there's no one way to do it. It looks so different in every region, every farm. And I love that there's the option to do what works best for you as an individual personality, for the product that you grow, for the region that you are in. And so I love how it can be different everywhere.
And do you find that the farmers are helping each other as well?
Oh, collaboration is a key component of agritourism here. And I think probably everywhere. There's really not as much of a sense of competition, but of community. And something that we have that we're very strong in California is with our local level or regional level farm trails organizations or producer organizations. So these are either a nonprofit or maybe a membership organization at the county level or maybe one region of a county, and they work with a group of farmers in that region and they market on their behalf. So whether it's a listing, like a booklet listing, here are all the farms that you could visit, or it's a map that shows you all the farms. We have something that we call open farm weekends that the Farm Trail organization will organize. This weekend, every farm who's a part of our membership is going to be open. They're going to be offering these different things, and they're huge draws for the public. And we know that the farms have a huge uptick in sales during those weekends. It's really beneficial for them. So that is something where California is really thriving. And I know some other states look at what we're doing and see the value in that and are trying to replicate that. So, again, as I said, at the local and regional level, we're doing amazing things. It's thriving. And then really, I feel like it's up to me to connect those dots and support it at the statewide level.
Excellent. All right. Anything else you want to add? I mean, I think this has been really interesting and insightful. So is there anything else that we didn't talk about?
Well, I'm sure I could go on, but yes, I don't think I have anything else to add. I love my job and I feel really inspired by the just resilience of agricultural producers. I know I've said this a couple times, creativity, innovation, but also resilience and determination. And I want to be a part of supporting that. And I'm really just so thankful for all the farmers and ranchers who are working so hard and up against it at every angle. And so many, continue on.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you. I really appreciate this. It was a pleasure meeting you.
It was so nice to meet you as well. Thanks so much for inviting me.
I hope our Agritourist podcast prompts you to think more about where your food comes from, whether it be your vegetables, fruits, meats, and even those sweet treats. Don't forget to subscribe and share this podcast with someone you think may truly benefit from or be inspired by it. Visit us at agra-tourist.com. Until next time. As we are learning from many of our farmers and entrepreneurs, strong connections help propel our visions. Through my interview with Lisa Chase from the University of Vermont Extension and Vermont Tourism Research Center, I was connected to an exciting and new organization called the Global Agritourism Network, or GAN for short. The Global Network is made up of agritourism stakeholders from around the world. They include farmers and ranchers, researchers, educators, community planners, policymakers, agricultural service providers, and tour operators, among others. It is currently free to join, so if you have any interest in agritourism, check them out at agritourism.edu/GAN, or just Google Global Agritourism Network. The link will be in our show notes as well. You never know, this global network may help you take your agritourism vision to the next level.